Ready. You end up with a bottle. I want to be good to go.
February 27th, 1991. Highway 80, 30 kilometers west of Kuwait City, Highway of Death. The end of Iraq-Iran war coincided with rising tensions between Iraq and Kuwait. The Arab states of the Persian Gulf provided a lot of financial aid to the Iraqi government during the 8-year war imposed by Iraq on Iran. After the end of the conflict, they wanted to collect their debts. Saddam Hussein believed that his country's war with Iran had benefited the Persian Gulf states, so Arab governments should forgive part of Iraq's debts. Saddam insisted that Kuwait forgive Iraq's $30 billion debt for the war with Iran, but Kuwait refused. This gave Saddam an excuse to show his opposition to the Iraqi-Kuwaiti border lines set by the British government in 1932. Prior to Saddam's opposition, Iraqi nationalists insisted for half a century that Kuwait had long been an integral part of Iraq and only became an independent country when Britain supported it. Kuwait's oil reserves were another reason for increased tensions in the region. They were almost equal to Iraq's oil reserves, but Kuwait had a population of only 2 million, while Iraq had a population of 25 million. Amid tensions between the two countries, Kuwait dug wells that Iraq believed were within the disputed border region. This angered Saddam. As relations between Iraq and Kuwait deteriorated, threatening news from the United States about an attack on Kuwait reached Iraq. But Iraq's indifference to U.S. threats on August 2, 1990, led to the war with Kuwait. The attack sparked many crises in the region. Occupying Kuwait meant that Saddam had 20% of the world's oil reserves, including those of Kuwait. On January 19, 1991, the United States and its allies, with the support of the United Nations Security Council, launched a large-scale airstrike on Iraq. A ground force, most of whom were American and British troops and infantry brigades, drove Saddam's army out of Kuwait in February 1991 and occupied the southern part of Iraq as far as the Euphrates River. Approximately 175,000 Iraqis were captured and nearly 100,000 were killed. One of the biggest wartime massacres in history took place on a highway called Highway 80, 30 kilometers west of Kuwait City, the capital of Kuwait. On the night of February 27, 1991, thousands of Iraqi soldiers and civilians were retreating from the occupied Kuwait to Baghdad, where they were massacred as ordered by George W. Bush Sr., then President of the United States. A day before the incident, Baghdad radio reported that the Iraqi foreign minister had accepted a Soviet offer of peace and had ordered all of its forces to retreat from Kuwait, according to Article 660 of the UN. Coalition fighter jets targeted Iraqi soldiers and civilians, targeting vehicles moving in the rear and front of the convoy on the highway, and then bombarded the convoy with machine guns and bombs for hours. After the bombings and killings ended, more than 2,000 cars were destroyed, and the burnt and torn bodies of tens of thousands of Iraqis were scattered within a few kilometers, later known as the Highway of Death. Hundreds more were killed on another highway called Highway Number 8 that led to Basra.
من فکر می‌کنم ما با یک عکس خیلی عجیبی مواجه نیستیم. ما داریم عکسی رو می‌بینیم به فرم تمامی عکس‌های جغرافیایی که در واقع بار منظره یا بار حادثه برتر از خود قابیه که عکاس می‌بنده. ولی چیزی که توی این عکس ما رو یک مقدار به صورت وسواسگونه خیره می‌کنه به خودش، اتفاقی که توی عکس افتاده. اون حجم از ماشینی که در واقع اونجا نابود شدن، جای انفجاری که روی زمین وجود داره، باعث سوال میشه که چه اتفاقی افتاده؟ مگر مثلا آدم فضایی به اینجا حمله کرده؟ و بار تکان دهندگی عکس کاملا به عهده سوژه است توی این قاب.
This is what George W. Bush later said about the killings on the Highway of Death. There was no evidence that Iraqi forces were withdrawing. In fact, Iraqi military units were continuing the war, and we preferred to continue the war.
قاب که در واقع به 3 قسمت 1/3 تقسیم شده و یک سری نقاطی رو می‌بینیم که توش به صورت هماهنگ پخش شده. جدا از اون جای انفجار باعث شده که چشم آدم کاملا روی این عکس بازی بکنه و خب این اتفاقا و این جای انفجار، نقاط، خود بزرگراه باعث میشه که شما یک عکس کاملا متعادل ببینید که بافتش قشنگ چشم شما رو با خودش میکشونه این ور اون ور.
The photos taken from the massacre in the 2 highways became unforgettable images of the Persian Gulf War. These photos are the clearest and most catastrophic scenes of destruction that are the result of war. A war that will eventually be waged against humanity, and its victims will be innocent people that have been caught in the crossfire.